Welcome to Clothing Culture. I'm Emily Lane.
I'm Bret Schnitker.
We speak with experts where we explore the global dynamics that shape trends in the fashion industry.
Brought to you by Stars Design Group, a global production and design house with over 30 years of industry experience.
Welcome back, Bret.
Thanks, Emily.
I am really excited to be here today and explore this conversation of leadership. How are you feeling about this?
Good.
Wonderful. Well, you have been a company owner for over 20 years. And prior to that, you became the top of a multi-billion-dollar retail organization.
Near the top.
Well, my question is, did you always have the desire to be a leader? Did you feel that you inherently were a natural-born leader?
I don't know how many people are natural-born leaders, and I certainly didn't have the desire to be one. I think,
really,
coming from design and, from my background in design, a lot of it was, I just wanted to express creativity, and hopefully people would buy things. And I think as I progressed through the ranks, I realized that that was a responsibility to achieve the goals that we had from the design aspect, that you had to learn how to engage various people from all sorts of walks of life and all over the world, internally and externally, to get things accomplished. And I think, we had our share of mistakes and our share of good decisions and answers, learning that leadership role, but it takes a while.
Mistakes are such a great way to learn. They're painful.
Yeah, I don't know if they're a great way to learn, but we all make them, so sure, yeah, right. You don't forget them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we are in such a unique industry because it's such a blend of personality types and skill sets. You have creatives, you have those who are highly technical and more on the left brain side of things. You have partners that are all around the world, working with factory partners in often third world countries. How do you go about kind of navigating the complexities and the variety of styles that you need to, work with this global team with varied dynamics and varied personalities?
Again, that takes time, but I really think it's leading with a heart. I think you're dealing not only with all of that you mentioned, but also different levels of people's experience and career experience and skill set. And I think really trying to take time to understand their motivations, what they're looking to do, understand who they are as people, where their strengths lie, where their weaknesses lie, are really important factors in helping you navigate what is in our industry, it's an amazingly diverse landscape. Coming from a creative side, earlier in life, I think we talked about in previous episodes, numbers were not something that really came supernatural to me. Today, they're a very important part of my life. And so I've also had to learn those skills and recognize the importance in balancing both the creative side and kind of that number side to navigate these waters too.
So really pressing yourself to also just ongoing learn. And
where life is a journey, if you really have the right attitude, you understand you're always learning.
I've had the opportunity to see you interview many people, and I found it so fascinating because you do have this approach of, I really want to learn who you are as a person.
Yeah.
It's not, I remember being young in my career and going to an interview and going, I need to say everything I can to make, to impress and let them know that I'm going to work as hard as possible, know. But I think we're in a very different time. We've talked about authenticity and the importance of it in building brands in many episodes now. But I find that in the workplace, it's equally as important. And I've always admired your approach to pull that authenticity out in interviews.
There are layers to people. And I think the first thing I've recognized over the years is that everyone that comes in for an interview, they have one objective: secure the job, right?
Right.
So, they're going to try to answer questions to help them secure that job. And I think first, it's important to let them know that it's okay to discuss weaknesses and it's okay to discuss mistakes. We've all made them. And I don't think if you're not making mistakes, you're not generally risking enough or leaning enough
That's a good point.
in the right direction. So I think it's important in an interview to again, peel back these layers of an onion, really get to know people, start to get them comfortable with the environment, and realize that, for us to put them in the right place in an organization and for them to survive and last, it's important to understand both strengths and weaknesses. And I think that can be, a change of dynamic, for people that are interviewing here.
Is that something that you just kind of see happen when you're asking questions? Like you can see when they're being real and when they're not?
Some, I think the ones that are in our organization, you get to a point where you feel like they're stepping into that place to be more authentic. Frankly, we've just met, right? In an interview. So, with that process, they don't know me, I don't know them, but you get to a point where they start to realize that it's important that they're more authentic and they have more of a dialogue, and that, we want that to be part of our ongoing dialogue here.
How do you go about really identifying that talent?
Wow. That's a really challenging question. Sometimes it's pretty clear. Sometimes it's taking a little bit of a leap of faith. I can tell you within our 3D design department, the first person I interviewed, he happens to be a pretty senior member here today and has been here a number of years, came fresh out of school, no portfolio, very quiet guy. So you can imagine that interview. And I would tell you in that case, it was just a feeling. It was, again, I had a feeling that he was going to care, and he was going to care enough to move from where he's at to be better. And that's certainly borne truth over the years. And then there's certain cases that you very quickly, whether, with designers, they're showing you portfolios, they're having technical people, they're discussing attributes technically. We've sat down with some people that just immediately blow my mind, with how technical they are. And we've had some that have been really pretty young. And you're just kind of amazed at the knowledge that they have and that they're comfortable discussing. That gives you a really good platform to understand where they could be with continued education and support from within.
Right. I've definitely you speak to that continued education side of things. I've seen you welcome people in with this kind of fluidity in their role, so that people can shift and grow and really explore areas of interest. And I think that is such a unique and special thing. How do you know when it's time for someone to, move into another space within an organization or take an even bigger role as a leader of a department?
It's communication from the person themselves, feeling comfortable enough to share where they're at in their role. And I think that we have really good department heads that communicate that and allow us to begin the dialogue about finding the right space for them. We've had people that have come in more of a project management role, fresh out of fashion school, and they really felt like that was a great start. And you find that some of them stumble quite a bit in that, and they tend to be maybe a little more creative. And the minute we move them over, it's they blossom, they immediately light up, and that they found at least the niche for, this next journey or next step or chapter of their career.
I know that you're not much of a micromanager. Is that something that you've never been a micromanager? Have you tried that within your company and decided, wow, this is just not working? Tell me your philosophies on management and how they've evolved and why.
When the company started in 1998, there were 3 of us. So you couldn't help because you were doing it all. So
right.
You kind of had to micromanage yourself to accomplish all the goals that you have. I think for a company to succeed and continue to grow, it's super important that you have staff that you can rely on, that you can vet, that you can trust to accomplish the goals. And I think that's that's the only way a company is going to be successful. I think having touch base points, having communication points, setting examples, setting, company goals, engaging with them when they're challenged, are all ways to keep that path continuing effectively. But I don't think there's any success with micromanaging.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about challenging personalities. How do you deal with that when somebody is, making an environment that's uncomfortable for others, or that they themselves are chronically unhappy, or any variety of things that make someone kind of a difficult person to be around. How do you work with that?
Challenging personalities or difficult personalities, as you mentioned, a couple of them, unhappiness in the workplace, things like that, they sort of paint the direction that, hey, they're just not a good fit. But I believe that conversation is a heck of a lot more gray in our environment. Many times it's their perspective and their experience level that creates a difficult situation. They look at a difficult country for manufacture in one direction. Hey, it's not easy. Why are you there? Mm-hmm. We should be only producing in countries that are easy. I've been doing this 30 years. I realize that every country that we work in has strengths and weaknesses, and they all have their challenges. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you hear a phrase like, why don't we just go where it's easy or things are non-complicated, it's a conversation of skill level, and you have to kind of step in and have conversations with them mm-hmm. about that, understand why they're having that discussion. They're afraid, in those cases, it's coming from a point of care. Mm-hmm. They want to have a good result. They want us to have good results with our clients. And so when you understand that dynamic, many times it's about having them step back and giving them an example, which provides them maybe a perspective in which I'm looking at. I had a situation like that a number of years ago, and the individual was really upset we were making decisions to produce in a specific country. And I likened it to, an airplane in the middle of a thunderstorm. And I said, conversations like that are like a passenger running up to the door of a pilot, pounding on the door and telling the pilot to get out of the pilot seat mm-hmm. because you were afraid of a thunderstorm. And what did he think the result would be if he, as the passenger, was going to jump in the pilot seat and try to navigate that plane? The pilot has had 30 years of experience.
Right.
I don't think the passenger is going to fare too well in a storm. And sure enough, then you allow a certain amount of time to go by, and you see the light bulb go off. You see that they recognize why we made that decision. Mm-hmm. And once that goes off, if they're the right type of employee or team member, they sock it away and they're like, that's why. And you start, I think it's, for all of us, it's about understanding where we're at in terms of our skill level, our knowledge of markets and mm-hmm. production, and how long we've been doing things, and we have to be patient with those people that the first step for them is the care thing. They're
right.
concerned because they care.
Yeah, it's making sure that you've got a team that has heart, as you often talk about. And it sounds like a lot of communication as well.
A lot of communication.
It reminds me of thinking, my background in business development and so forth, in marketing. It's always asking questions so that you can get to that deeper truth. And it sounds like you're talking very much the same thing. If somebody comes to you upset or with a concern, it's asking those deeper questions to understand where they're at, and then help share your knowledge.
That's absolutely one of the healthiest approaches. And when you have a million things going on, you really have to develop that as a habit, because mm-hmm. you kind of want to say, hey, here's the truth of the matter, and you'll get it.
My way or the highway.
No, but it's kind of like you're thinking about all the different, challenges that you have during the day, and you kind of want him to understand it, and they're not going to step into your into your shoes until they've had a little more experience. And I think, asking a lot of questions, it shows certainly that you care enough to bring them along that journey with you and help them understand more of that landscape. And certainly there are times that I and senior leadership makes mistakes.
Well, yeah. Well, like you said, if you're not making mistakes, if you're not taking risks,
Right.
that you're not learning, you're not growing and,
Right.
Evolving. So, I'm curious about, speaking of taking risks, tough circumstances, difficult decisions, oh, wow, as the leader, those are on you.
Yeah.
So what is your process for making those tough decisions? And do you have any examples of maybe where you've had to, you've had to make that call?
Yeah.
And
when I look back over the business, and really any business that I've been at, a lot of people on the outside of business think that just happens linearly. You start at this volume and you kind of end at this volume, and it's kind of this linear ride.
Right.
It's more like a roller coaster. Right. There's all sorts of stuff that occurs along the path. And, that develops what I think is important for success in a business is perseverance. You've got to have a longer term perspective. We want to go crawl and curl up in a corner. And there's many of us this year that, that could have certainly been a choice with COVID. Curl up, close off, and hope you make it. But, it's about making sure that you stay focused on the long game. And, difficult situations or circumstances, I think for us, my challenge over the years was always being a bit visionary. I think that certain leaders are kind of visionary and creative or methodical and rigid. And it works for different industries at different paces. And I've really learned to surround myself with people that were more methodical decision makers, because I know in myself that I tend to I want to be on the leading edge of technology. I want to be on the leading edge of production globally. I really have a very good, feeling, whether it's borne out by fact or not, that things could work out well. And I realize that it's important to surround yourself with people to say, hey, what if? And I think one of the biggest learning curves I ever had was I think we were one of the first U.S. companies into Ethiopia years ago. And we spent time vetting the country. I believe that the future of production could be Africa, for us. And really was fascinated with the infrastructure that was being built in Ethiopia. It was state-of-the-art equipment, huge factories, lots of support by European communities that were very, very experienced. And we certainly went through a lot of vetting opportunities, exercises. As a visionary at that point, I had done these tests, and I felt like now's the time to grab the country. The labor rates were good. It was a member of AGOA, so you had, duty free to the U.S. And I just felt like that this was just a place to stake a claim in the future. We had secured a really large order from a really great group, and it was more of a basic uniform order, something that really works in countries like that, repetitive tasks.
That are just kind of getting started,
too,
right?
If they can repeat the style over and over again, that's a really good thing for these developing nations. So I felt like we just had all the pieces in place. And I would say maybe, 2 weeks after multiple containers left foreign countries of all of our fabric for these, this multi-million-dollar order heading to Djibouti to clear into Ethiopia, the Ethiopian company had a huge issue with the staff.
Disruption.
Yes. With the European staff that was on board, and they kicked them all out of the country, or the majority of them.
Oh, wow.
And,
How many were there?
20-some that really managed. One of the factories was 3,200 workers on the floor, and that didn't include cutting and sewing. And I mean, it's a very, very large, very vertical, one of the most vertical, from spinning, knitting, dyeing, everything, and in the middle of nowhere, Ethiopia, up in Adwa. And, I have millions of dollars of fabric and trims and boxes and poly. I mean, everything to produce the garment had to be imported, and they were all en route. And they replaced the head of the factory with a 25-year-old Ethiopian IT manager that had zero experience in apparel. So,
wow,
my life passed before my eyes. I think I cried a little, to be honest. And
still cry a little.
Yeah, right. And I think, you had to roll up your sleeves, and subsequently, I think we spent a lot of time, a good amount of our time over 3 years, living in the country, really managing that factory on behalf of ourselves to get things shipped out. And I have a bittersweet, memory of that time because I love the country, I love the people, but it was a extremely challenging time, and it was certainly costly. It didn't go nearly the way that we had expected it, and while I still have that visionary bend, I still like to be a leading, thought maker in our industry. I definitely think a few times before I make some of those decisions and surround myself with people that can really vet it accurately.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like, does that make you much more cautious when it comes to making such visionary kind of decisions?
I definitely think I'm more cautious.
Yeah.
I think if you ask my methodical partners, maybe I could be more cautious still. But I don't think if you're not risking, you're not progressing. And so while we have taken a completely different tact when it comes to production execution for the company, for our clients. We're very, very conservative. No one likes an optimist for production. When we have some of these, visionary thought processes that don't affect our clients, we're still reaching, but I think we're also discussing it a lot more about what the pros and cons could be.
So I'm curious now, having evolved into this place of leadership, do you find it easy to recognize, like, oh, here's somebody who's gonna, take the world by storm and lead their own company someday? Or do you see these qualities in others? And quick follow-up, what are the qualities you would look for in a good leader?
I think many times I do see the qualities, but that's always borne out by time. I get excited about people. I think that there's individuals that we put on that I really, at the beginning, you see your future in their hands and you like where that place is. But I believe that is distilled correctly over time. There has to be this consistency, and you have to really know people. So I don't think, it's not like love at first sight. You have some good indications that they can have that skill set and do the job right. But I think it really takes some time to really be sure of that, and that's been our case here. I think really important things that help me make decisions for future leaders within the organization, and we've discussed it before, but for me is heart. I mean, I think they have to care about what's going to happen to the company for the future. They have to understand that leaders are always responsible for the employees that are here. They have to care about the clients. Too much of our business in the USA is this, very short thinking exchange. And I think it's very important, at least in our company, to make sure that we have people that really understand that we're in it for the long term. And I think long-term relationships are critical. May not be shared by both sides. Many times industry and relationships in our business today are very transactional. But I would like to believe that the right relationships that are going to last a long time are that there's this mutual understanding and, care about each other, each other's side. And I think that goes a long way. So heart's important. I think understanding proper skill sets. Our industry is getting more and more technical all the time. And that's a huge challenge, for the US. We've mentioned in other episodes, we don't support manufacturing. So really having skill sets that can stay up to the level of the changes in the industry can be difficult to find. So there we reach outside of the US. We're in a global economy. We as a people in the world, we're connected, and this is certainly a global business. So we really look outside. We look globally to plug in, those strengths. But skill is really important. And then the last key is talent. I don't know if you can really teach talent. I think that it can be improved. I think it can be honed over time, if you will. But talent's just something that you see maybe early in its rawest form and over time with a much more eloquent impression. But we have some really dynamic people, and I think when you combine skill, talent, the ability to embrace technology and heart, those things are really, really important for me.
I think those are really great thoughts. Do you have any other little nuggets to share for those who have goals of, owning their own company or leading their team or evolving into that next stage of their career?
I think, I urge patience and I urge communication. Those things have served me well over time, and certainly perseverance. There are definitely times, and many times over 30 years, that you look at a situation that goes south and you think, oh my God, are we going to survive this? We have been through those in the past, and we have survived them. And people that have these longer businesses that have been around for a number of years, they all have the same stories. And it really comes down to, this perseverance, certainly perseverance individually, but also having a team that can help hold everything up that has that same perspective of perseverance, because there will be good and bad times. No one expected COVID to hit us.
Right.
And I think it's important that you have a team around you and that you really continue to move forward regardless of the circumstance.
Really speaks to the importance of, curating a team of people that you genuinely really like also.
Hopefully.
And,
Yeah, right.
and I think that's important, especially knowing that you can lift one another up when you need it.
Sure.
And you can celebrate,
Right.
on the good days also.
Absolutely right.
Well, thank you so much, Bret. I really appreciate these insights, and looking forward to having more conversations in upcoming episodes. Make sure you subscribe so that you can stay apprised of upcoming episodes of Clothing Culture.